Good morning and welcome. My name is James Cook. Let's vlog. Today I think it's time to have a look at the Audi e-tron. My initial thoughts. Hello, Jazzy. He's on his new birthday present. I specifically didn't want to make this video immediately. I have now done, courtesy of going up and down the M1, a good 500 miles or so in this car, and I do have some comments. I wasn't really expecting a huge amount from this Audi e-tron. After all, it isn't a Tesla. First, let's go through the negatives. Get those out the way nice and quickly. In terms of space, interior space, this car is a little bit like a reverse TARDIS. On the outside, it's huge! But when you're inside, not so much. I mean, there's plenty of space in the front seats and plenty of space in the back seats, but the boot is considerably smaller in terms of surface area. You know, there's quite a lot of headroom, of course, compared to a Tesla Model S, but there's a lot less actual bed space in the boot there. And the frunk, don't even get me started on the frunk. That thing is tiny, especially to my Tesla, which is the original Tesla pre-Autopilot with the huge frunk. Also, I'm not a big fan of this way of opening the frunk. There's a little catch under there somewhere. Where has it gone? Ah, there it is. Nope. Come on. Ah, can't get my finger on it. There we go. Okay, so first we open it up and we've got this situation. Then we lift that up. And we find our, well, basically it's just a cable store.
The teeny weeny beany teeny frunk. That's what it's called.
And the closing action on this is really not great. You've got to kind of, can't even do it with, yeah. Tell you what, Jasper. Is that closed? And regen. That is always one of those things that I find the classic car makers just struggle with. Why they can't get their head around the concept of one pedal driving, I have no idea. So with this car, by default, it's basically got no regen, unless there's a vehicle in front that's slowing down, in which case it will sort of automatically regen for you under those circumstances. I found that extremely irritating, basically immediately. So I went and turned off the automatic regen and put on manual regen. No problem, you might be thinking, except for one small fact. When you have it in manual regen, by default there is no regen. You have to use the flappy paddles, and even then you can only access half of that regen by lifting off the accelerator. The other half will only come in when you put your foot lightly on the brake. Not exactly the one pedal driving I've become used to. It is okay though to use, although still quite annoying, especially because every time you start the car you have to remember to turn up the regen so that you have any at all, and every time you come out of cruise control you also have to manually increase the regen or it just doesn't do anything. So yeah, I'm not, the regen on this, I'm not very keen on the way that's organised. Range. That is another thing that this car does struggle with. So if it was on 100%, it'd be about 230, I would say, which is okay, I suppose. That's about, you know, maybe a few miles more than my 6-year-old Tesla Model S with 130,000 miles on the clock. But this is brand new. I kind of figure it should have a bit more range, especially when you consider that it's not exactly cheap. By default, the car only wants to sort of charge to about 80% unless you go for the sort of long trip up to 100%, which suggests to me that if you were to regularly charge it to 100% because you need the extra range, you'd quickly find yourself with a damaged battery. Don't know that for sure, but that's what I would reckon. It's not going to last that well over the years if you constantly charge it to 100%, because no cars do, including Teslas. While we're talking about range, The best way to fix a car that doesn't have great range is to make sure that charging is quick and easy and convenient. Well, this is a CCS only vehicle, so you can forget about convenience. You've got maybe one charger at the various different motorway stops. If you're really lucky, maybe two, more often than not one. You can't use superchargers, you can't use CHAdeMO. The Type 2 charging, I actually don't know how fast it goes. It's a rarity that people would use that, and certainly you wouldn't want to use that for a long journey. Otherwise you'd find yourself having to stop for a long lunch, 2 hours plus. Yeah, that's not really what you want on a road trip. The acceleration is okay, but I would say it was mapped a little bit too much like you would map it in a petrol or diesel car for my taste. There isn't enough power immediately off the line, but it does work. It's just not quite as immediate as I would like, even though it is, at least on paper, a fairly, fast car. And then we come to the last of my gripes. This car has got a guessometer. What were they thinking? It's like, okay, so it is definitely a better guessometer than you get on, say, a first-gen Leaf, which was my very first electric vehicle. It's wildly better than that. I mean, in that car, you could leave, drive up a hill, and by the time you got to the top of the hill, it'd say you only had about 70 miles of range left from full charge. Then you go down the other side of the hill, and it'd tell you had 130 miles of range. And then you go up a hill again. That was totally unworkable. This is obviously a good deal better than that, but it still changes. So you can't tell how your efficiency is affecting the amount of battery charge you have left. When it says you've got 140 miles left in the battery, you have to think about how you've been driving. If you've been driving really quickly, then that 140 miles could easily be stretched out to 160 by just driving a little bit more carefully and slowly. Equally, if you were driving carefully and slowly, that 140 miles is probably the absolute best case scenario that you can get. And if you put your foot down a bit more, or you have stop-start traffic, you might find that you don't get that 140. And that's my problem with guessometers. You can't use your human intuition easily to work out how far the thing will go, which, as far as I'm concerned, is the whole point of telling people a range. You should be able to work out, okay, so for example, in my Tesla, if it says it can do 160 miles, then I know that if I drive reasonably carefully on the motorway and don't really go over 60, I'll definitely get that. Equally, if I do 70 or 80, I know I'll probably get 10-15 miles less, and if I drop it down to 50-55, then I'll probably get 10 miles more. And these are just things that you learn as you do the miles. You can't do that if the goalposts are moving, so I don't like that. Time to have a look at the positives. Now, there's plenty of headroom. I'm sitting in the back and it's great. Actually, I've been quite surprised by how much I do like this car. In particular, and I'm going to cover this off right from the beginning, I really like the lane keeping assist in this. Okay, it's not autopilot, but given the constraints of what's possible with self-driving vehicles, both legally and technologically, I actually think it works better than autopilot for the driver. So for example, okay, obviously I had a rear end collision a couple of months ago, not my fault, and now I've had a front end one, again, not my fault. So I've recently been in a brand new Model S that did have autopilot, and I quite quickly decided that I wasn't really going to use it unless it was proper stop-start motorway traffic jam. The reason being because it would bug me continuously, and I wound up having to put more attention into trying to stop the thing from complaining about me not having my hands on the steering wheel when I did have my hands on the steering wheel than I was paying attention to the road. And that's not the point. The point is you're supposed to pay attention to the road, but the car makes it easier. And that's why I like the lane keep assist in this Audi e-tron, because what it does, it's almost like putting bumpers down the lane. Whilst you're in the middle of the lane, you can very easily guide it and finesse exactly where the vehicle is in the lane, and it won't fight you doing that at all. Which means that, of course, then it realizes that you are in control and paying attention because you're putting in those small inputs. Then if you start to wonder, or if the road sort of turns and you don't turn the steering wheel smartly enough yourself, then it will help you, and keep it in the lane. So it's brilliant. and I basically use it. It actually comes on automatically, so you don't have to say you want to use it or not. It will just do it for you. Consequently, I just use it all the time, and I'm finding it really good and a really great driver aid. Autopilot, on the other hand, it's basically the car wants to drive itself. So when autopilot is on, it does all the small adjustments to keep you smack bang in the middle of the lane. And it doesn't really want any input from you. And if you start to actually give it real input, then it will disconnect the autopilot, which is of course what it should do. But the problem is, if you're not constantly sort of moving the steering wheel a bit, but not too much, it complains and says, put your hands on the steering wheel, give it a little tug on the, and so you do that, and then a couple of minutes later it does it again. It's like, there's probably a way to do it, but the only way I found that worked at all was to put one hand on the steering wheel and not rest my elbow on anything, so that I had the weight of that one hand always pulling down on the steering wheel. It's just not, I shouldn't have to be thinking about things like that. They should be able to sense my hands on the steering wheel. So lane keep assist, big fan. Autopilot, great for driving the car, not so great when you're supposed to be driving it too. Something I do quite like is the interior fit and finish in this vehicle is very nice. It's Audi, and I like Audi, and I like their aesthetic generally. I quite like the look of the vehicle from the outside. Although I like the looks, this big silly grille is probably costing them about 5 miles of range. And if you are bored of Teslas, which a lot of people are, because let's face it, they're the only proper EV out there, and lots of people have driven them, and I've done over 100,000 miles in them, and I think they're great. But I am a little bored by the fact that from an interior point of view, they are all very similar. And actually, while we're on the subject of that, from a driving feel point of view, they're almost indistinguishable. Definitely a positive. It's not a Tesla. Yeah, the button push feel is nicer in this car. Although, to be fair, Teslas don't really have buttons, so maybe not a fair comparison. The Tesla actual screen, miles easier. So would I buy one? Well, not if I wanted to drive more than 160 miles in a day with any kind of regularity, because of the charging situation and the fact that it doesn't have that much of a fantastic range compared to some of the other EVs you can get for a similar sort of amount of money. Otherwise though, absolutely. And you know what, my thoughts on this may change over the next month or so. You'll have to watch this space to find out. Not a massive fan of this key thing. And the car doesn't really seem to turn off automatically, or certainly not on automatically. It's got a little stop-start button, but hey-ho. I suppose that's just a vestigial thing from the old petrol days. Oh, did I lock it or unlock it? See? Keys. I like the Poppy-outy door handles too, but that's probably just me. Let's try that again. Yay! These door mirrors, hello Jasper, which are actually cameras here, feed through into here on each door, they're pretty good. At first, I found them really uncomfortable because I constantly was looking for where the camera should be and not finding it. However, in the space of a couple of weeks, I have definitely got used to it now, and yeah, it does a pretty good job. Is it as good a job as an ordinary mirror would do? It doesn't feel like it, but actually I think it probably does. I like the sort of way it highlights yellow. If you're going to go across a lane and there's something in your blind spot, it will flash yellow at you round the edges. That's a great little feature. So yeah, they're well implemented. I thought it was going to be more difficult to live with than they are. They're actually fine. Door bins, always nice to have. Elon, not sure about this thing. In fact, I'm not really sure about all of these physical buttony bits. Find them a bit difficult to navigate. Does this come up? Oh, it does. Oh, there's a hidden cubby. Very handy for smuggling. The reversing camera's pretty good, and it's got the around view thing, so you can see a sort of top-down view of your car as you're parking and stuff like that. And despite the fact that it's all far more technical and involved than what Tesla did, I actually prefer the reversing camera on the Tesla. The reversing camera on the Tesla is so good and such a wide angle and so clear to see. It's actually considerably safer to be looking at that screen than it is to be turning around and looking out the back window. because you can see a much greater field of view. You can certainly see if there's a small child behind the car, which you can't necessarily do by looking out of the back window. It's, yeah, I mean, I'm generally a big fan of reversing cameras, but Tesla have somehow managed to do it better than Audi have in this case. Don't know why Tesla don't do an around view thing, actually. I mean, they've got plenty of cameras on the more modern Model S's and X's and 3s and Y's. Maybe it's a feature that's coming. Or maybe they figure that the car will just be able to see and sense everything around it and just inform you in more of a graphical way, which is actually kind of what they do on the motorways. You can see all the cars around you, which kind of, yeah, I like that feature. This doesn't have anything like that. I need to give you guys a little bit of an update in terms of the schedule for the show going forwards. Not quite ready to launch it all yet, but I will do a sort of little short update video on that in the near future. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you have, remember to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and follow me on Instagram and Twitter if you don't already, and I will see you in the next episode of the vlog. Bye! In terms of space, interior space, this car... Thanks, Jazzy. You try not to make too much noise when you're over here by the camera, or this could take a while and we need to go to get lunch, don't we? All right, let's try that again. You know, fast car in comparison to my Tesla, which is basically the oldest Tesla that they have ever made.